Hi, everyone. I am Angela Savitri with freedomfromchronicstress.com, and I help women leaders be free of burnout and chronic stress. And I am happy to be able to have my colleague here today, Jessica Drummond, to share with you and us about a very important topic, something that I've experienced and still experience from my chronic stress and burnout journey, which is adrenal fatigue. So thank you very much, Jessica, for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, I'm glad that you are here. So this is for women. If you always feel like there's something that's not quite right, you're always tired, you're always exhausted, no matter kind of what you do, this conversation is for you. And before we jump in and get some of Jessica's expert advice and information, let me just do her full justice and give you a little background information on Jessica. So Jessica Drummond is the founder and CEO of the Integrative Pelvic Health Institute. She's passionate about caring for and empowering women who struggle with women's health conditions such as endometriosis, PCOS, bladder pain, low libido, hormonal imbalances, weight gain, period pain, painful sex, and post-surgical orthopedic or pregnancy-related pelvic conditions. So all things pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. She's equally passionate about educating and supporting clinicians in confidently and safely using integrative tools to treat chronic pelvic pain, bowel and bladder, and other women's health issues. Having over a decade of experience as a women's and pelvic physical therapist, plus owning a private women's health clinical nutrition and coaching practice, gives her a unique perspective on the integrative and conservative options for pelvic pain management, which is why she's here today. And Jessica was educated at the University of Virginia, Emory University, the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and also Duke Integrative Medicine. You can find out more about Jessica and her work at integrativepelvichealthinstitute.com. So again, thank you, Jessica, and once again, very knowledgeable with women's health issues from both a clinical medical perspective as a physical therapist, with my ground being in rehab and OT as well, with combining that with some integrative and holistic approaches as well. So I'm glad that you're here today.
Thanks so much.
Great. So so let's just go ahead and jump right in. I wanted to talk to you because in working with the professional women that I work with that are very driven, career-oriented, not necessarily looking to move more up the corporate ladder per se, but looking to have looking to have more ease, and presence in their life. I think that me having experienced adrenal fatigue and knowing how challenging it is to constantly regulate that, I see some of these common symptoms within my clients and wanted to share that with my audience and also my private clients. So can you tell us a little bit about exactly what is adrenal fatigue and what are some of the common signs and symptoms that women may experience if they have it?
Right. Well, adrenal fatigue is kind of the common name for what we call HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysregulation. So essentially that means that your hormonal stress response, which is initiated in the brain and then is actually sort of executed through the adrenal glands, which are two little tiny triangular glands that sit on top of each kidney. That system has gone haywire in some way. Generally speaking, it is oversensitive, so it reacts to stress. And then that does that over time. It either hyperreacts all the time or it's just been activated, but for like all the time, day in and day out, more of a chronic stress situation. And so either that system is too jittery or it's overworked, and eventually it kind of burns out. And so that's why the common term is adrenal fatigue. Your stress hormone levels are out of balance, which impacts the hormone levels of the rest of your endocrine system, your thyroid, the functioning of your thyroid, your sex hormones, your libido, also just general health that has to do with that, the neurotransmitters in your brain that are influenced by your sex hormones. So it's wide reaching, and it essentially comes from a maladaptive or a hyper or a long-term having to deal with stress over time.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like when you're in that state of hyperactive HPA axis versus when it's just depleted? Because I've experienced both.
Yeah. So at first, your body tries to step up to the plate, right? So there's something going on where there's all this chronic stress or something that's very intensely stressful. And so your body is doing everything it can to buffer that. And it's designed to actually do that to deal with chronic, acute stress. So like literally being chased by a tiger or something like that, you know, on a very infrequent basis, like a few times a year. And so at first, if your body is submitted to some amount of stress or is submitted to a high dose of stress, your cortisol, which is one of your main long-acting stress hormones levels, will go up. Mm-hmm. You will, you know, have that kind of heart racing. You also might have norepinephrine and epinephrine join in, which are the more short-acting hormones. So that kind of triggers that sensation of fight or flight. You know, you have a little bit more energy. You're able to power through. You have difficulty sleeping.
Kind of that adrenaline rush.
The adrenaline rush, right. But it lasts a while to the, you know, and then you kind of deal with that stress, you get through it, you power through whatever you were worried about, and then you collapse. And now if it's just happening very rarely, and then your body just does that collapsing and it kind of recovers. The problem comes when you keep yourself keyed up. So let's say you're in a very stressful job, and for years and years and years, you have to kind of gear yourself up just to go to work. And every single day there's a stressful meeting, and you're working, you know, way too many hours, and your body is just trying to like hold on, and you're fueling it with things like caffeine and, you know, just trying to keep up the pace. You know, right before a meeting, you grab a Snickers bar because you just need like that sugar rush. You know, it's like you're just pushing yourself up and up and up, and it just wears out the system. So actually the worst stage of adrenal fatigue, so it kind of starts with that too much cortisol, and you have trouble losing weight, you have trouble sleeping, you're just kind of over keyed up all the time, a lot of anxiety. And then the worst stage, stage 3, is when you've exhausted that system and you literally can't, you know, you can't pull it out anymore. So you're either propping yourself up with caffeine, but again, you still can't sleep very well. So that's the women who are kind of having a glass of wine at night, like with the hopes of being able to fall asleep, but then having coffee in the morning because they just cannot get out of bed otherwise. Or you just really are forced to kind of drop out of life because you are so fatigued.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you bring up a couple of good points that I want to emphasize. And one is that this is really a dysregulated nervous system, you know, there's what I tell with my, my newsletter followers and also my clients is that you've got, you know, the sympathetic part of your nervous system that helps us do things and engage. And then you've got your parasympathetics, which helps us calm and rest and digest. And these become dysregulated, and so you key up. And what's fascinating is that so many of the women I work with love that keyed up feeling. They love to be adrenalized, and they're not just a bit, they're over adrenalized, but they love that adrenaline rush. And that's great if you want to do that for a little while, but to stay in that constant mode just for years on end ends up with this sort of depletion that you experienced. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is you're speaking my language, because I always say if you find yourself having to have caffeine in the morning and some alcohol at night, you're depleted. You're
Yeah.
depleted. If you're dependent on those things, there's nothing inherently wrong, but if you're
Right.
dependent on those things, this is really a sign of, something else going on, and is a significant depletion of what's going on in your body.
Right. Essentially, those are just forms of self-medicating
Yeah.
that don't work very well, but we sort of try them because, we think that's what the option is.
That's right. And it's also, we see everyone else doing it too. So therefore,
Right. It's
it
very
must be
acceptable.
okay.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I'm counterculture. So,
Right.
so tell me, how might someone actually get a diagnosis of adrenal fatigue?
Yeah, so diagnosis comes from doing saliva testing. So basically, you can order a test, you can do it yourself, or you can have a functional nutritionist like myself or a functional medicine doctor order it for you. And essentially, what you do is you literally spit into 4 test tubes at certain times throughout the day. Because cortisol, that stress hormone we were talking about, the normal one that helps you just buffer regular stress or very rare occasions of acute stress, has a daily flow about it. And so it actually starts out fairly high in the morning, and that's what we call the cortisol awakening response. And it just gets you out of bed, this little burst of cortisol. That's a normal, healthy thing. If you don't have that, that's why people become dependent on caffeine to do it for them. Mm-hmm. So you should have a little burst of cortisol in the morning, and then it should be dropping off through the entire rest of the day. So around noon, we check it around dinner time, we check it right before bed. And what we see is that first, the cortisol level, as we just talked about, will be high the whole day. You'll be kind of like always too much. Then it flips. So those are women who have really a hard time getting out of bed in the morning because there's no cortisol awakening response. It's too low. But at night, their cortisol level goes up when it should be down. Right. And then they can't sleep. So that's we just talked about, the wine at night, coffee in the morning. And then when it gets really bad, cortisol level is just low all day long. Yeah. And it's best to do that test on like a normal day, not on an extremely stressful day, unless your life is always extremely stressful, right. Then do it.
Those are people I work with, yeah.
When you're not on vacation, just do it on a regular day, and that'll give you your best information. And then as you're healing, it's a good test to check, every 3 to 6 months, and then just look at it once a year, going forward.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a maintenance type of thing after you've got it a little regulated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've just to reemphasize how people can get it checked. They can go to a clinical nutritionist, a functional medicine practitioner. Mm-hmm. I also had my saliva test done with an orthomolecular psychiatrist.
Okay.
A holistic health psychiatrist that specialized in orthomolecular medicine, and had success there as well. So your primary care may or may not mm-hmm. be exactly. And I think that's what's important for people to realize, is that it may or may not be available, or your primary health care, your allopathic traditional medicine doctor may not have this test readily available.
Right. And there is one other way to check it. You can look at a 24-hour urine sample, which will kind of show cortisol all day long, all the time. So that's another kind of cortisol test that's very helpful too. Yeah. But still, you would most likely have to go to a functionally trained or holistically trained medical practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. And you described kind of my symptoms to a T when I was experiencing it, because I initially gained 15 pounds mm-hmm. and always felt adrenalized and go, 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 do, do, do. I never felt tired. Mm-hmm. And then I started to experience severe insomnia, where I mm-hmm. only slept 4 hours for honestly over 8 months. Like every wow. night I slept 12 to 4, 12 to 4. And I never felt tired, because I was still adrenalizing. I was never a big coffee drinker, so I wasn't doing that. I was just burning, burning, burning. And then eventually I depleted all of my levels, and I lost 40 pounds not trying and not in a healthy way at all, and became clinically depressed. So I had this high anxiety, which was kind of my baseline level of operating,
functioning, yeah.
And now I had this combination of depression, and I always just felt like this, until I kind of treated not just the adrenal fatigue, but also the depression, anxiety, some underlying other stuff that also was going on. So just describe how that cortisol was working just to a T, and how it manifested in my journey. So,
and that that kind of 3 to 4 a.m. time is actually really important to point out, because sometimes women with adrenal fatigue fall asleep all right, and it's better, we can talk about this when we get to treatment a little bit, but it's better to be falling asleep before about 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
But at 4 in the morning, two things can happen when you have adrenal fatigue. One is adrenal fatigue goes hand in hand with blood sugar dysregulation. So you're either having like a blood sugar drop at that time, which is waking you up and causing a spike in cortisol, or you could just be having a really early cortisol awakening response, and they tend to happen at that 3-4 o'clock time. So that's kind of a warning sign. And I see it a lot in women who had been breastfeeding, and they sort of have trouble kind of getting back on a rhythm. They're used to getting up and feeding, then they add get up and go to the bathroom, and it becomes this really bad habit. It's one thing if you get up, use the restroom, fall immediately back to sleep, no problem. Get up, feed the baby, fall immediately back to sleep. But really, it shouldn't be then when you're awake and staring at the ceiling for 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or getting up for the day at 4 o'clock.
Right. Well, I just started working at 4 a.m. I was like, not the right thing to do. Not the right thing to do.
No.
Yeah.
Not the best treatment.
Yeah. So tell us, one of the things that I dramatically changed in my healing journey was how I approached nutrition. I used to think that eating well was all about caloric and fat intake, which is so not the right exactly. And I went from that approach to really about nourishment and eating whole foods and so forth. So tell us a little bit about what, if any, nutrition or dietary guidelines would be helpful for someone to follow who's recovering from adrenal fatigue.
Well, I think exactly what you said about nourishment. And there are two things that food can do that is really one of the key cornerstones to healing from adrenal fatigue, because most people, especially women in their 30s and 40s, which is where this starts showing up most of the time, and I've even seen it starting younger and younger, which is a troubling trend.
I was 29. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is, there's two things you want to do with food. So cortisol is kind of the opposite hormone to insulin. Both of them work hard to keep your blood sugar in a very narrow range. The body, that's a survival issue. The blood sugar has to be in a safe range. So what I call this the stress sugar roller coaster. So imagine you get up in the morning and you have your cup of coffee, or you have a bagel, or you have a bowl of cereal, or something that turns really fast into sugar, maybe even a donut, And you start out in the morning, right, breakfast of champions. You start out the morning with no, blood sugar. Essentially, you're fasting all night in a good way. That's fine. But so with that cortisol awakening response, within the first 60 minutes, you need to eat something to get your blood sugar nice and steady through the day. The problem is most people eat something like what I just mentioned that spikes your blood sugar really fast. And so the body freaks out because that can kill you. And it shoots a lot of insulin into the bloodstream to get that sugar out. That's why over time, adrenal fatigue can morph into pre-diabetes or diabetes. Mm-hmm. So you get way too much insulin, which then crashes your blood sugar back down. So then at 10 o'clock in the morning, you're starving. You need a snack. If you need a snack between your meals, again, that's a big like red flag that you're in the beginning stages of adrenal fatigue. So you have, again, you like have a power bar or like something, at your desk to make it to lunch. But again, most of those things are very carb heavy. Sometimes they're low fat, which just, again, kind of dumps the increases the sugar in your blood really fast. Often they're low fiber. They're like processed things that you just grab, granola bar, graham crackers, pretzels, whatever. Shoot your blood sugar back up and the cycle starts again. So you see that could happen like 5 times a day. Then you have a sandwich at lunch. It does the same thing. You have your, Snickers at 3 o'clock. You have your pasta for dinner. And all day long, you're like, right?
Yeah.
So instead, what you want to do is use food to balance your blood sugar instead of making your adrenals and your pancreas do all this work all day long.
Right.
Yeah.
And how do women do that?
So for breakfast, you want to start with protein, clean sources of animal protein, things like pastured eggs, pastured bacon, turkey sausage. You can even have leftover fish, leftover grass-fed beef, smoked salmon. Think about protein in the morning. If you're in a hurry, there are some good protein powders. You have to be kind of mindful of that. Yeah. But that's a little tougher. I wouldn't just like blanket say go get a protein powder.
Stick with some whole some eggs or turkey.
It's a whole food,
Right,
and then you have fiber. So for most people, that's vegetables. Again, leftovers from the night before are great. Steamed greens. You can have things like roasted sweet potatoes, something like that. Then you want some fat, so nuts and seeds, things like, sprouted and soaked or raw, almonds, pecans, other great fats are avocado, coconut oil, coconut milk. So this sounds really weird, okay, if you've been eating a bowl of cereal for your entire life.
Right, yeah.
But eating this kind of breakfast, and if you want to get really nourishing, you even want to add a little bit of fermented food to help with your digestion.
Like
sauerkraut, kimchi, or like a plain sugar-free or no sweetener coconut yogurt or something like that. Or if you're not dairy sensitive, and some women are not, you just plain raw milk yogurt, that's fine. So a very nourishing, see how much stuff we packed into that breakfast? That's going to start to heal your adrenals, and it's going to start you out with very stable blood sugar. And again, you want to really do it within the first 30 to 60 minutes in the morning. Yeah. And then you are not, I guarantee you. So here's what I do. I feed my clients like crazy.
Right. Eat.
You are going to be shocked at how much food you can eat.
Sure.
And you're going to be losing weight because your body can finally relax. Yeah. Don't forget that evolutionarily, our biggest problem was famine, lack of food. Right. So when you starve yourself unintentionally because you're eating food, but you're eating stuff that's not really nutrition, it's like paper, it's not actually food. When you nourish yourself, your body can relax. Right. So your sympathetic, your parasympathetic nervous system can do its job. Your stress system isn't firing like crazy. Yeah. And then you think sort of similarly at lunch and dinner. Sure. A nice source of protein. You can add extra superfoods like bone broths or, berries, salads. And you can certainly, there are a wide variety of choices, but the general formula is a healthy source of protein, some good quality fat, and plenty of fiber.
Yeah, sounds good. And just as an example for those that are afraid, I can't eat that much for breakfast or lunch or whatnot, I'm going to gain weight. I can tell you that I had always kind of naturally just been a little bit chubby, but when I lost that weight, not by trying, but just because of sickness, those 40 pounds, those have stayed off, and I have since eaten this way since. A whole foods, protein in the morning, healthy fats, plenty of coconut oil, not afraid of it. Give me some, grass-fed butter, and it's been great. It hasn't come back on unless I overeat, which is another story. So
sure.
So,
and
yeah.
I mean, you can, there is sort of like healthy junk food that people have all over the place, but that's fine. I think the focus is on switching your perspective from that your body needs vitamins and minerals and macronutrients like protein and fat. And we've really been kind of falsely starving ourselves and it's destroying female hormones.
Absolutely.
It really is.
Yeah. And so let's just switch gears and talk about activity level. So in kind of 2 minutes or less, can you kind of tell us, this is one of my pet peeves with my clients too, is that because they're doers, they love to exercise, they love to power through. But when you are in this level of recovery from your adrenals being exhausted, what type of activity level is important to engage in for, recovery?
Well, it depends a bit on what stage you're in. So if you're in the flat out, like your cortisol is really low and you're really fatigued, honestly, I 100% recommend that you stop exercise completely, except for something like restorative yoga. You could do like a meditation practice, even a gentle like walking meditation practice, slow walks, but your priority should be on getting yourself on a sleep routine. So that requires kind of like a nighttime bedtime ritual almost. Like if you think about how you put your toddlers to bed, they've kind of been running around all day. You've got to like give them a bath, read them a story, kind of set yourself up a calming nighttime routine, shut off your electronics by 8 p.m. and go to sleep at 10. Even if at first you don't go to sleep, like you've got to put your body back in the rhythm.
Starting on that clock.
Yeah. So sleep is most important in that third stage because it's really almost dangerous. And it's tricky because I was the same way. I had gotten myself to pretty much, level 3 adrenal fatigue. And because of the insomnia, I was so frustrated. I would swim every night. Like I was trying to just exhaust my body.
Right.
It was like the hardest exercise I could think of, right? And it was the worst idea. But I didn't know, So you've got to start with really restorative stuff. And then as you improve, you want to add things that feel good in your body, something like NIA, dance-based exercise. The long, slow slogs of running or, unless you really enjoy running, then gentle jogging, doing it in a location that you enjoy outside. But really that long-term cardio is hard on the adrenals because it raises cortisol levels. Much better to do like HIIT or something like in intervals, starting at sort of moderate intensity. And as you heal, you can go to higher intensity. And yoga I really like for adrenal fatigue because of the mindfulness component, the breath work, the parasympathetic activation.
Yeah. And trying a gentle to moderate yoga class in lieu of a high-intensity vinyasa or ashtanga, perhaps. Yeah, I just want to put that in there because a lot of my folks are into yoga too. So, and then also, in that recovery phase, like I also suggest just leisurely walks in nature to be able to connect, and stroll. You're moving the body, but you're not power walking, and you're able to kind of receive by just being out in nature. If you live in an area that's climate, that climate allows that as well. Yeah.
And, interestingly, there's some good research showing a nice calming of the cortisol levels from what's called earthing, which is really simply like touching the ground.
Yeah, putting your bare feet on the ground.
You don't need any fancy equipment. If you are wearing sneakers and you don't want to take them off and walk in the mud, you can touch trees that are rooted into the ground. So I used to do that in the winter when I lived in Connecticut and I didn't want to walk around barefoot. But so things like gardening are very restorative, walking on the sand and the beach, walking in the grass barefoot. And like I said, trees are a nice kind of conductor when it's too cold or you don't want to take your shoes off for any reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the listeners want to Google earthing, they can find a lot of information. And even there's a whole book dedicated to earthing. And even earthing blankets, although being out in nature is by far the best. Yeah. Wonderful. And so the last question that we've got is kind of how long, if women are kind of kind to themselves and follow these rules of, not rules, but guidelines of eating a protein and fiber-based diet within 60 minutes of waking, allowing their activity level to be gentle, how long can women expect, let's say if they're just in that, right at the in-between, like not at the burnout phase of complete cortisol depletion, but in that middle ground, was there a kind of a length of time that you can expect women to start to see some gains by trying some of these guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, they should start feeling better, especially with that flipped curve where it's hard to fall asleep at night. You know, if they start the bedtime routine, change the nutrition, change the activity, and I would add one other thing that's essential, building a support network and kind of absolutely chopping your to-do list to like no more than 3 things that you're working on at any given time, like being really mindful about how you're spending your energy. If you do those things, normally you'll begin to feel somewhat better within about 3 months, but it can take a good year to 2 years, depending on the level of support you have, how committed you are to recovery, and how depleted you were going in, before you can feel, quite resilient. And I think it's important to really understand, to really take that in, because again, high achieving women like we are, and we know, we're like, we want it fast,
right?
We want this thing fixed. Okay, I figured that out. Now it takes some time. Adrenals are ancient glands that need to be really taken care of. Respected, honored, and the healing of them is really an assessment of what in your life is causing this relentless stress. And unless you deal with that, you need to do these things to restore them. But unless you get to the root of what is the cause of that relentless stress, you'll always be managing it, because it's like this constant Achilles heel.
Yeah, totally agree. And that is, in my working with women, I take women through 5 steps, and the step that we're talking about today is step 3, which is self-care without the guilt. But the core objective of the program is to look within yourself and to identify what is it, how I'm operating, whether it's something I believe or something that I fear, something I feel guilt about, that's driving this incessant need to do. And once that's discovered and treated with compassion, kindness, and love, there's a lot more choice available to women, that although these are great things that are necessary and very practical body-based things, you mentioned the emotional and really spiritual and mental component that goes along with this as well, of looking within and learning how to reapproach how you reapproach yourself and your life and your activities moving forward. So it's a very interesting and very fulfilling, journey. And it does take some courage. It takes some courage to look within and to discover that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing all of this with you. I appreciate you so much sharing with our community. Any final parting words before we sign off for today?
No, I think, though, as you said, it's important. This is really common among women, and yet it can be seen as a gift of your body so loudly expressing its intuition that you have to listen and address and kind of get to that level that you just started talking about of what really how do you really want to approach your life? So it's a time, it's something that can be fully recovered from as you take that sort of spiritual, emotional journey of yourself, which is nice.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. Again, this is Jessica Drummond. You can find out more about her and her work at integrativepelvichealthinstitute.com. And this is Angela Savitri with Freedom from Chronic Stress, wishing you a wonderful afternoon, evening, and blessings on your recovery and journey ahead. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.